Brew Strong is brought to you by morebeer.com, where a man can brew like a man.
Time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. Back for another episode of Brew Strong with my delicious co-host, John Palmer.
Hey, howdy, hey.
Delicious.
Yeah, no, people say they like Greetings Cretins.
You know, it's...
I tell you, I got to go with them. I think that's your best one so far.
Okay. I was tempted to go with the underdog one, you know. There's no need to fear, but, maybe that was being a bit pretentious.
Yes. Greetings. That's you. That's really you. Well, and we're also blessed with Dr. Charles Bamforth, better known as Charlie to everyone he speaks with, I guess. He's very unpretentious as well. And a great guy. And he's just spent about an hour and a half talking about beer haze with us. So if you're listening to the archives, go back and find that show. Also find his show on Hot Side Aeration was also excellent. And we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. As you know, this show's done live, and we have listeners in the chat room, and we've got some questions from them. And we're going to do that until we run out of time, which is about 50 minutes from now. So let's, without further ado, why don't we get that first question going?
Great. Wonder Beer from Finland wrote into us this week. Good questions from him. Are post-fermentation pH levels in beer worthy of closer attention than they're currently given? More like they are for wine, for example. Or is hitting the correct pH in the mash and boil good enough?
pH makes a significant effect to beer quality. So, sure, I think pH needs to be attended to quite carefully. There is I did a review on pH a long time ago in the Master Brewers Association Journal Technical Quarterly, and there's a whole bunch of different factors which will influence the pH of the finished product. One of the key things is freshness, flavor stability. The lower the pH, the less flavor stable a product becomes. So if you've got a beer at 4, it's more prone to staling than one at 4.5. Having said that, a beer is more microbiologically stable at 4 than it is at 4.5, both because of the pH effect and also because the bitter acids, which are antibacterial, anti-lactic acid bacteria, they are more potent at lower pHs. So the pH can have a direct influence on stability, and it can have both flavor stability, and on microbiological stability. In terms of foam and haze, there are different opinions on that. It's a mixed bag.
Now, that's interesting because I had some beers analyzed by a local good-sized brewer in their lab, and they were telling me that my pH was a little high. And I was like, running around, 4 or 5 or so. And he said, I was a little high, maybe it should be a little lower. And I'm like, well, I don't know. My beer's pretty good. I never made any sort of adjustment based off of that.
No.
And I'm glad I didn't. I was like, chasing numbers I don't think is necessary. If the beer tastes good, don't necessarily chase the number. But if the beer doesn't taste good, then you need to make some changes.
And I know clearly there are some beers that are way down in the 3s, and, that have been produced with an interesting collection of other microorganisms. But and they're very sour, of course. So the pH has a direct influence on sourness. It was interesting that a number of years ago we actually tracked a very famous brand of beer, and that's what we used to do. That's what all self-respecting brewing companies do. They see what the competition is doing, and we monitored the pH of one of our competitors' lager beers, and it went. They'd moved it over a period of time from 4 to 4.5. And we watched them do it. We actually plotted it out over about a 12-month period. They didn't do it overnight, just, to see it. But over a 12-month period, I think it was because they wanted to take a kind of a sourish edge off the product. It was a fairly gently flavored lager style beer. And its pH is around 4.5.
So kind of the pH for a beer, the proper pH for a beer, is kind of dependent on style.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it will be influenced by the malt, for example. The more intensely you kiln, you will tend to lower the pH.
Right.
So sure, but most beers are between 4 and 4.5. Some beer towards 3.9, some a little bit higher than 4.5, but not many. But of course, there is a whole collection of beers, including the lambics, for example, that are much lower pH than that.
Right.
And I have to say, a friend of mine used to get very cross with me if I say what I think a good beer is and what a bad beer is. And how dare I, just because I got fancy letters on my card, tell her just how good this beer is or that beer is. But a base lambic it makes me appreciate how good some other beers are. Especially the ones with cherries put in.
I almost poured one of those for you, Charlie. I'm glad you've said that.
Okay.
Quick follow-up to that. Wonder Beer wants to know what acids are typically present in finished beer.
A whole bunch of acids. You're going to have a little bit of lactic acid, you're going to have some acetic, you're going to have some succinic, you're going to have some citric, and so on. Basically, they're going to be produced by a lot of them is going to be produced by the yeast. And organic acids are direct products of yeast metabolism. So the acids that are found in the metabolism of the yeast, they will spill over and come into the finished product. The pH, people say, well, during fermentation the pH falls. It goes from 5.5 to, let's say, to 4. Why is that? And basically, it's a release of acid. It's a release of the hydrogen ion, which is basically what you're measuring when you measure pH.
Okay.
And how about the effect of carbonation and carbonic acid?
Yeah, clearly. CO2 is, carbonic acid. It's a equilibrium there. So the CO2 itself, of course, is... there's a whole story in its own right.
It's got a whole sharpness to it. And
reacts with the pain receptors. And I can't remember the precise story. Actually, in Davis, we have a professor by the name of Earl Carstens. I forget which department he's in, but he is a world authority on pain reception on the palate, and it's the trigeminal sense. And I can't remember, he explained to me how it works, but certainly pH comes into that, and, in terms of the pain receptor and the hydrogen ion. And I can't remember. He's quite a character. He knows a lot about rock music as well.
They go hand in hand.
More than I do. I know nothing.
He sounds like a very unhappy man.
No, he's a remarkably happy guy.
Oh, good.
Because pain, you see, you love it. All these chilies and
makes everything else seem so great.
Yeah. All right. John writes in from Utah, and he's interested in brewing lower alcohol beers. He says, I don't know how to do this. How do you keep the same flavor and other important parts of the original recipe, but keep them low alcohol? He said there's not a lot of info on this subject.
Is the state relevant to this question? It's we could devote the next hour to that. You see, the big problem is alcohol makes a direct impact on flavor, and it makes an indirect impact on flavor. So if you don't have any alcohol there, you lose the bite and the warming and the alcohol note, but also it influences the distribution of some of the other materials into the nose, into the headspace. And so, it's very difficult to make a truly low alcohol beer that really is of a high quality. How to do it? Well, there are various ways. One is not to make the alcohol in the first place, and the second way is to make the alcohol and then strip it out again. Right at the start of the last segment, I talked about an alcohol-free product that we used to sell in Saudi and other places. And the way we did that was to make a full-strength lager beer and then strip all the alcohol out of it by low heating under a vacuum. And so you drive off the alcohol. The problem is you drive off so many other flavor compounds as well. All the esters and the higher alcohols and so on. They all get sucked off as well. So then you have to add them back. And because there's no alcohol, you can't get the right mix, So it's very difficult to do that. You can produce something which is, you'd say, okay, it's beer-like. But it just doesn't have the that you want from the alcohol. The other way to do it is not to make the alcohol, and that's how you could do it at home. And the way to do it is to mash in at a higher temperature. The classic temperature of mashing is 65 Celsius. So I think that's 144 Fahrenheit. Is that right?
Yeah.
This
145,
dreaded Fahrenheit business.
Yeah.
Anyway, 65 Celsius, you see. And that is there's a balance point there, because that is the temperature you need to gelatinize the starch. But that is just about the highest temperature that the beta amylase, one of the starch-regulating enzymes, can stand. So as you start to raise the temperature, you kill off that enzyme. You keep the alpha amylase, which initially breaks down the starch, but you need the beta amylase to make the fermentable sugars. And you kill it off. So if you mash at 72 degrees Celsius, well, if you want to do a quick calculation, well, that's but 72 degrees Celsius,
162.
Then you will break down the starch, but you won't convert it to fermentable carbohydrate. And therefore, when you ferment, you produce less alcohol. And that is probably a better route to go. And so you produce a lower alcohol product that is kind of so-so. What some people do is they just basically use wort. It's got all that raw, harsh, green character that really I and people say, oh, it's authentic. Well, that's just because it smells like a brewery. It doesn't smell like a beer. It smells like a brewery. So the yeast, by using the yeast, you can clean that up. And if the wort is less fermentable. So the way to go is mash in at a higher temperature.
Okay.
Well, and one of the things that drives me nuts is people say, well, if you have a higher temperature, the beer is sweeter and it's maltier, and it's no. It's you're forming longer chain dextrins. They really don't have a whole lot of flavor to them.
Oh.
They're not really sweet. If you taste maltodextrin powder, it has maybe a kind of a little subtle sweetness to it, but really overall effect is not necessarily that. It's just unfermentable sugars, and the flavor profile remains the same. And I used to think you would always get more body from a higher mash temperature, but even that's not true.
No,
it's that's another myth of homebrew legend, and it's a much more complex process than that.
Well, you mentioned mouthfeel, and that's still one of the great mysteries of what really does determine the mouthfeel of beer. Earlier on, I mentioned, is it polyphenols? No, I don't think so. You mentioned dextrins. My friend and colleague, the emeritus professor Michael Lewis, years ago did a study and showed, you need to add bucketfuls of dextrin per bottle of beer to have any impact on mouthfeel. Some people say it's glycerol. We talked about carbon dioxide and this tingle and so on. That's clearly something to do with mouthfeel. And of course, anybody who's ever had a beer with nitrogen gas in it knows that smooths the mouthfeel, sometimes to an excessive extent. So in terms of these lower alcohol products, no, they're simply less fermentable.
Well, I'm gonna go on my own tangent here. So now another interesting thing that I've experienced over the last few years, and when I started out, I was told that the lower your finishing gravity of your beer, the drier it is and the less sweet the perception is, and the higher the finishing gravity, the sweeter it is, and so thus, your beer is dry or sweet. But I've had examples side by side of beers that Mike McDowell has brewed, where one has finished 2 Plato lower than the other, but the one that finished lower was sweeter than the one that finished higher.
Yeah.
And it's they're again such a complex blend of the alcohols and the residual sugars that make up that residual gravity.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's just it's not that clear cut.
No, it isn't, and it really is. There remain a number of things in beer and in brewing that are they're worthy of further research. We should have a few more university departments given over to doing it, and perhaps we could answer some of those questions. But no, I mean, the residual depends how what is the reason for the attenuation at that point? Is it attenuated because there's no fermentable sugar left behind, or is it stopped fermenting because you've run out of freemium and nitrogen, or or something else is limiting
problems?
Yeah, that will also have a clear implication.
Well, I've always said that, and I may be totally wrong on this. I don't know where I got this idea, but the simpler the sugar, the sweeter it tends to be than the more complex the sugar, or not?
Well, if you look at the relative sweetness of sugars relative to sucrose, which is the stuff you dip in your coffee, okay, so that's got a relative sweetness of 1. From recollection, I think glucose is about 0.7, 0.8, so it's less sweet, and maltose is less sweet still. It's about 0.5. But fructose is more sweet, so fructose is 1.2, 1.3. And of course, when you split up a sucrose, you get 1 fructose and 1 glucose. And so if you split up a sucrose, it becomes slightly sweeter.
So the two numbers, slightly sweeter?
It is slightly sweeter, so I think it's because I must have got my numbers wrong somewhere, but it's slightly sweet, and that's called invert sugar.
Right.
So
which yeast do before they utilize the sugar they use. They
absolutely.
have an invertase enzyme. That
it comes out of the yeast cell, and the sucrose just gets chopped up outside the yeast cell. So sure, glucose is sweeter than maltose. Let's put it that way. But maltose is not as sweet as sucrose, and they're both disaccharides. So it's,
okay.
But maltotriose is going to be less sweet than maltose.
Right.
And by the time you get to maltotetrose, which is not fermentable, it's not going to be very sweet at all. And bigger ones are,
Okay, so there is some method to my madness. I'm not totally...
You're not totally crazy. No.
Totally crazy. All right, great. See? I told you I wasn't totally crazy. This guy's a doctor over here.
Lucky you have him to back you up.
That's right. Yeah. So there. Let's make sure we isolate that quote. Yeah. All right.
Try to get one more in before you break?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe from Chicago writes in that a topic he rarely sees discussed is homebrew shelf life. He says, as I brew more batches, I'm beginning to accumulate and save bottles from past batches. So I want to know, I try to plan out how long I can keep them around before drinking them. What are the different factors that are going to affect my homebrew shelf life?
Well, the three main ones are, how did you make it? How much oxygen have you got in the bottle, assuming it's in the bottle? And what temperature are you storing it at? Let's go in reverse order. Basically speaking, the longer shelf life will depend on you keeping the beer as cold as you can without freezing it. So the temperature makes a substantial effect. If your beer is at room temperature, whatever room temperature is, let's say it's like this nice room here, 20 degrees Celsius, then let's say it'll last 3 months. If it's really good beer with a minimum air content in the bottle, if you raise the temperature 10 degrees Celsius, then it's going to go stale 2 to 3 times faster. So by the time you get up to, and I live in Davis, California, it can be 50 degrees Celsius in my garage 4 degrees Celsius in my garage in the summer. It's going to be stale in a couple of weeks. If it's in the refrigerator, it's got a lot of shelf life. so buy a lot of refrigerators. But the way in which it's packaged is very, very important. Remembering air will creep between the bottle and the cap. I'm assuming that this beer is in bottles.
I think so.
Yeah, and and I'm just talking flavour stability now. If we talk about haze stability, then clearly, if you've got it colder and you've not stabilized it properly, then that's going to increase the turbidity. But do you worry more about the flavour life or the turbidity? We've said a lot about turbidity earlier on, but it's up to me. My own beer at home, I would worry more about the flavour than I would about the appearance. And the second thing, the next thing is the foam will deteriorate with time as well. So the short answer is, you can't store it for forever, and I would brew enough to sustain my sensible drinking habit.
Sensible being the key word.
Right.
So temperature fluctuation is also a bad thing because it's going to pull in more oxygen underneath that crown cap as the pressure expands, contracts with the temperature.
Correct.
And a lot of people will ask on the keg beer as well that temperature fluctuation, does it have any negative effect on beer stability? I know that in the wine world they want a micro fluctuation because it helps pull oxygen or whatever through the wood or whatever that might be. But in stainless kegs in beer, does somebody emailed me and said, hey, I need the room in my refrigerator. I've got my beer in there. I want to take my beer out, set it outside for a week while I ferment something else in the refrigerator.
Right.
Is that, how does that shorten the life of my beer?
Yeah.
And would it just be temperature related? The cooling and heating doesn't have an effect?
The major fact will be the actual temperature that it's going to then pick up to. Mm-hmm. One of the classic ways of aging beer for haze studies is to cycle the temperature. Mm. Some brewers will hold the beer at 37 degrees Celsius, 98, 99 Fahrenheit for a day, and then chill it down for a day to 0 or 4, and that will be one cycle. Mm-hmm. And in that way, you can accelerate the breakdown of the product. Mm. So, that's quite an extreme. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anywhere in the world where that happens, other than in a laboratory. Mm-hmm. But it is a standard way of forcing the beer. So if you are going to cycle, even if it's between 4 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius, it's going to accelerate the breakdown of the product.
Well, and of course, the better your sanitation, the less
absolutely.
Bacterial load, wild yeast load you have in your beer,
critical.
The longer it's going to be stable.
Absolutely.
And a critical factor as well.
Oh, totally. And I naively perhaps assume that we're talking about a product here which has been fastidiously produced with minimum microbial content.
Well, then you're not talking about Justin's beer.
No, you're certainly not. You're assuming too much, Charlie. And then just in terms of the beer itself, because we talked about sort of factors around the beer.
Right. Just
another part of his question was, does the gravity of the beer itself play a part in shelf life?
Yes. Some of the really high-strength beers or high-alcohol products, then you might start to think that, okay, well, with some storage, we're going to get some interesting flavor changes taking place. And you're going to get some of the nuances that the wine guys talk about, some of the acetal formation and so on. And that's not entirely uncharted territory, but it's that could be an argument, a positive argument for storing beer. But certainly the lower gravity, the lower alcohol products, for most beers in the world, from the time they're packaged, now the clock is ticking and it's downhill.
Well, and I don't want to drag this out because we need to take a break, but one of the things I've noticed is the darker the beer, the more highly kiln grains you have in there, the more flavor stable it seems to be and oxygen stable it seems to be than the most pale beers. If I brew a German Pilsner and it's in perfect shape. It's absolutely fantastic at month 3. 6 months down the line, it's not going to be a good beer anymore. Yeah. If I brew a stout of some kind and it's perfect at month 3, I can go several years. If all being equal, all kept cold, all not being shaken around, good sanitation practices, it will be stable for a much longer time and seem just as fresh with over a greater period of time. Is that antioxidants and all that stuff that people talk about?
There have been a number of studies which have suggested that when you kiln, you do produce some antioxidants. Mm-hmm. And this is part of, the color reactions, the Maillard reaction, where you're making the melanoidins and so on. Some of the intermediates are radical scavengers, and so they are probably antioxidants. But the other component of it is that
flavor masks other things.
Yeah. If you've got a more robustly flavored product with a greater depth of flavor, then it is going to mask, and some of the stale character, some of the aged character is not going to come through as readily. Okay. And that's why I always say, people are very rude about some of the great American lagers, and sure, they're subtly flavored and gently flavored products, but they can't hide any crime. You can't hide anything in those,
right.
And so that makes them very hard to make.
Well, what I noticed this on first was a Schwartz beer, and versus essentially very much a similar recipe, except for the Carafa Special, which is the huskless Carafa, and that seems more stable. Yeah. So that's why I was thinking, there's something other than just flavor. There seems to be something else going on here that's keeping this more stable.
There are certainly some people who believe that. I reserve judgment. I don't. It may be.
Right. Okay, great. Well, let's take a short break. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but we'll be back after the break with more questions with Dr. Charles Bamforth.
Brew right. Brew smart. Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
This holiday season is one of gratitude, giving, and winning. More Beer says thank you to all their wonderful customers with deals from Thanksgiving through New Year's, in addition to low prices, free shipping, and the More Beer deal of the day every day. And one lucky customer is going to win Regan's Big Fat Package, the very first More Beer pressurizable conical fermenter. Rolling out just in time for the holidays, it's their brand new redesigned stainless conical line with a new threadless racking port, new stand options, and a new pressurizable lid. They're giving away one of these new pressurizable conicals on December 31st. For every order you place with More Beer between November 1st and December 31st, use the coupon code CONICAL up to once every day to enter yourself into the drawing. Go to morebeer.com for more details. The 2009 More Beer season of winning. Win yourself some great deals and maybe even a brand new conical fermenter. Enter today only at morebeer.com.
Downtown Joe's, located in the historic Oberon building in beautiful downtown Napa, California, offers an award-winning brew pub experience from 8:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. For 15 years at the corner of 2nd and Main, Downtown Joe's has been voted Best Night Spot 7 times and Best Brew Pub for the last 4 years in a row. Brewmaster Colin Kaminsky's handcrafted ales, like his Tailwagon Amber Ale and Double Secret Probation IPA, are the perfect accent to riverside dining, live music, and a relaxing outdoor patio. Don't miss the Beer of the Month, special rotating taps, and the BN Army Member Special. Wear your BN gear, get 10% off your beer. Visit downtownjoes.com to make reservations, peruse their extensive calendar of events, or just read more about their fantastic beers. Come enjoy the fine beer, food, and music. Downtown Joe's, the award-winning brew pub where you'll feel at home.
This is www.thebrewingnetwork.com.
sit down next to it, grab yourself a paper towel, and watch those yeast have sex.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew Strong.
All right, Charlie appreciated that one.
Very good.
All right, you want to get right back into it?
Yeah, let's get right back into it.
Okay. A topic that's been coming up here on the BN lately is no sparge brewing. So Don from New York, wrote in, besides using more grain, what are the disadvantages of a no sparge style of brewing?
Well, I mean, simply you leave stuff behind. I mean, but what are the disadvantages? I mean, one can only talk about advantages. I mean, what are you trying to brew? What's he trying to brew? Does he say?
He doesn't say. And of course, we're talking about a home brewer, so it doesn't sort of using more grain doesn't matter too much to him.
Yeah, he's loaded with cash, and he can just put it.
But he doesn't say specifically what kind of beer he's
your average American pub beer.
Yeah.
And the goal being bring the best beer possible. That's what people always ask. How do I brew the best beer possible?
Well, it's really when you are over sparging, when you're really going to the last runnings that really the real problems start. Mm-hmm. So in terms of there's a balance there. What are the advantages? The advantages are that potentially you can get a very high gravity and you can produce some very interesting, stronger, higher extract products. I wouldn't say there are any. The real disadvantages arrive when you're really trying to squeeze out the last drops of product.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how about when you're making something like a traditional British mild?
Right.
And you want to avoid getting too much astringency, tannin extraction, polyphenol extraction from the grain. No sparge, and then add water to the runnings to get to your gravity. Or is that going to produce the best possible flavor profile? If
again, it comes down to suck it and see. If you pardon the expression, in terms of producing a traditional mile, which is sadly in decline now, mm-hmm. Then you're not going to be. You're going to be selecting a grist that is giving you the best balance of color and maltiness, but without too much harshness, roast character, because you don't want that. But you are going to, a brewer is going to be he's not going to be over extracting, but he's certainly not going to be avoiding the earlier runnings. He's going to do that, or she. So, it's horses for courses. Again, it really is, in terms of avoiding astringency, it's later on that really the problems
mm-hmm.
arise.
I think my comment on that would be that beauty is in the palate of the beholder. So depending on the style you're trying to target, if you're trying to target a mild with a no sparge beer, or I guess what I'm saying, look at the style that you're trying to brew and look at your perceptions of what characterizes that style. Mm-hmm. With a mild, I think that's a kind of a good example. There is a certain amount of roast and background graininess that you almost expect based on the commercial examples that you've tasted. Mm-hmm. Now, if you brew that with a no sparge, so that you really minimize the polyphenol graininess or something, kind of that you can taste in a lot of milds, then you're going to think, well, that I didn't really hit my target. I didn't mm-hmm. quite make the beer that I want to make. But you can adjust for that with recipe. You can add some more roast grains to pull some of that character in.
Yeah, but when I think mild, I'm thinking of miles from Midlands of England and the home of down in the industrial Midlands of England, the steel mm-hmm. regions there. And the miles that I've got in my mindset, and perhaps
they're not roasty. They're actually fairly sweet.
They're relatively sweet, you know. So I would differentiate between something with a roasted, a more astringent character will be closer to, in my parlance, a stout than a mild, which would tend to be a somewhat sweeter, relatively low alcohol product. You know, I mean, if you think of something like Banks's Mild from Wolverhampton, which is incidentally the finest soccer team in the world. That's another story. I was up at 4:45 this morning watching them live on the TV.
Insane.
Yeah, totally. But, you know, Banks's Mild from Wolverhampton is, you know, it's only, I forget the exact alcohol content, somewhere in the mid-3s.
Like 3.2 or something like that.
And my mother was telling me, by volume. My mother was telling me only recently that, you know, she remembers a time when people would, you know, they were working in the heavy industry, lots of heat around, and they sent out to the pub, and they were bringing jugs of this back in for people, and they were working, you know, with heavy machinery and so on, drinking this because it was easy to drink, and it was sweet and nutritious and not overly alcoholic and so on. So I think we're
a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of
I think we're probably digressing somewhat, but you know, for me, a mild is a darker, sweeter, mellow toffee, not diacetyl toffee, but caramel nature, more so than a roasted, burnt type of thing. So
that's good to hear, because I think we don't get much mild here in the United States, of course. And what we do get, and what people tend to brew, and when I've tasted competitions, tends to be...
People tend to not know what they're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, you tend to get the last runnings of a brown ale served as mild.
You wouldn't, you know, you'd use a malt for mild, in my opinion, that was not at the, you know, the chocolate malt end, but more closer to the crystal. But you know, so you put a relatively large amount of this in to get a caramelly character rather than less of a malt that has got a really harsh burnt character, which is to me not right. But that's opinion.
It's coming from a quality source. All right, another question. Mills writes in, why is it when I brew with Weyermann and Dingman's Pils malt, do I get a ton of break material as compared to foreign and domestic wheat and two-row?
I'd have to look at those malts. Which of those first two malts?
Weyermann or Dingman's Pils, basically so Pilsner malts.
From local
Continental Pilsner.
Yeah. And he's curious, you know, he kind of goes on to ask, is it water chemistry due to less modified Pilsner malt that's doing this, or...
So he's comparing a Pilsner malt with a pale...
With a domestic two-row.
A domestic two-row,
right.
Okay. You know, the break is going to depend on a whole bunch of different materials. And the malt, you know, the factors that are going to be relevant are going to be things like modification, they're going to be protein content, and so on. And it's without the analysis in front of me and without comparing them side by side, it'd be very difficult to say. But the break is going to be heavily influenced by those parameters.
Okay. All right, good. Here's another good question that came through. Says to Jamil and John, this is from Marty in New York. I've got an issue, although most brewers might love to have this issue. My beers always finish dry, 10-10 or lower. And he says, although this is great for my IPA or double IPA, I'm having trouble getting the residual maltiness in my stouts and porters. And he says, I judged at the New York State Fair, too, and it appeared every stout I tasted was just too dry and almost astringent. One of the judges commented that this may be from the maltsters. What are your thoughts?
Blame it on the maltsters.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Well, this you know, speaks back to that question I had about, you know... people claiming, oh, you know, you get this maltiness from higher finishing gravity, and you don't necessarily get maltiness from high finishing gravity. And in my opinion, when I say maltiness, I'm talking about the flavors of the malt. I'm not talking about malt sugars and malt sweetness. If I'm talking about the sweetness, I talk about malt sweetness. If I'm talking about maltiness, I'm talking about the flavors. So, you know, you can get those flavors, and you can have a beer finish out at whatever gravity, and you can still have those flavors. If what you want is he's talking about stouts and dry stouts. Now, dry stouts do finish at a low gravity, and they do have a certain maltiness. I think you were talking about nitrogen serving affecting the kind of the overall impression of the beer. What would you say to this guy? I don't know what to say to this guy.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when we're talking maltiness, we're talking flavour. And I think we can just forget about the gravity in this instance. The maltiness will depend upon how the grain, the extent of modification, but also the extent and the way in which it's been kilned and dried. And for roasted malts, roasted. The final gravity is going to be influenced by the fermentability. Which is going to again depend on how that malt was produced, what its enzyme survival rate is, and how you've carried out your mashing and so on. So the final gravity is going to be determined by fermentability. The maltiness is going to be all to do with how your grist was produced and what your grist comprises. It really is as simple as that. But don't blame the maltster.
Well, and when I see somebody, and I've gotten this question a number of times where people say, all my beers are finishing really low gravities. What's going on? I start to think, bacteria or wild yeast, or first off, I say, they're like, I'm mashing at 152 Fahrenheit. I say, well, try 160. Go ahead and give it. You've got nothing to lose. Give it a try. If you still end up with a lower finishing gravity, then I've got to imagine there's some sort of bacteria breaking down those complex sugars that and that's how you're getting so low. If it's not having an effect, then
it really is about temperature control in mashing because. As I said before, a relatively subtle difference in temperature can have a profound effect. But if you've got a malt which has got a high enzyme level in it, then you will need to go to a slightly higher mashing temperature to compensate for that. If you've got a relatively low enzyme malt, then, the mashing temperature needs to be... So it's that enzyme level in the grist balanced against the temperature that is that you're striking at. Those are key determinants for final gravity.
So if you're getting a high quality malt from one maltster and you get an equally high quality malt from another maltster, there's variations in the malt that may require you to be a degree or two one way or the other just to get the same result.
Correct.
Look at the diastatic power of the malt on the malt analysis sheet. It's in degrees Lintner.
Correct.
And it was invented by Mr. Lintner? It was. Okay.
But I didn't know him personally.
Oh, okay.
How about Pasteur? Did you have Pasteur?
Yeah. My father may have known him.
Your friend Louis? All right, let's take a short break, and we'll have more questions after this.
Keep your carboy cap on. This is Brew Strong. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Push from the Brewing Network, and I want to tell you about the Brewmaster's Warehouse and how you can get 10% off your next order. I'm a pretty techie guy, but I've never seen an online store like this. It's awesome. Go to brewmasterswarehouse.com and click on Brew Builder. You can whip up a custom recipe so easily even Sven could do it. Seriously, it's slick. You can share your recipe with your own logo and notes to the Brewmaster's database if you want, and the best part, it keeps a running tally of the beer you're building while you're doing it. Then, bam, click Buy Recipe, and your cart is filled and ready to go with helpful suggestions in case you forgot something. This thing is amazing. Brewmaster's Warehouse is run the way a homebrewer would do it, with great service, fast turnaround, and $6.99 flat rate shipping. Brewmaster's Warehouse and the Brew Builder blew me away. Check it out today at brewmasterswarehouse.com. I'm serious. And don't forget to put BNARMY in the discount code box for 10% off your order. Check out brewmasterswarehouse.com. Cheers.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 9 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer and Brew Free or Die IPA throughout California and Alaska.
And now it's also available on draft at select accounts in the Bay Area.
So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in a can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack cans.
BNARMY members, are you looking for a discount on hops? Keep listening. Nico's Homebrew Supply at nicobrew.com has hops by the ounce and by the pound. Choose from varieties like Amarillo, Centennial, East Kent Goldings, Hallertauer, Simcoe, Summit, Tomahawk, Warrior, Willamette, and more. And adding new varieties all the time, many for less than $20 a pound. Whether a couple ounces at a time or an 11-pound bag, all hops are shipped vacuum sealed and frozen straight to you. Nico's Homebrew Supply offers store-wide $5 flat rate shipping and won't waste your money on unnecessary overhead or advertising. They're going bare bones and passing the savings on to you. The staff at Nico's Homebrew Supply loves to brew and is committed to keeping homebrewing affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to join in this great hobby. And for a limited time, use coupon code BNARMY at checkout for a Brewing Network discount. Visit nicobrew.com. That's Niko brew.com for your hops and more. nicobrew.com, your bare bones buddy in the brewing business.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Writing a review of WLP 400.
What? You're reviewing yeast?
Yeah. White Labs has home brewer reviews of all their strains. Are you new to these interwebs? Check it out.
That's awesome.
White Labs, your source for great yeast, invites all brewers to visit whitelabs.com to read and write your own reviews of all their yeast strains. Get real-world tips and tricks from other brewers who have made the most of their vials and post your own experiences. It's another way White Labs brings you closer to the best yeast on the planet.
And send. There you go.
You misspelled flocculate, dude.
What?
White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Williams Brewing is your online resource for prompt delivery of quality home brewing supplies. Since 1979, Williams Brewing has offered the finest equipment and freshest ingredients and the best customer service in the business. Cut hours off your brewing sessions by using one of their 11 varieties of famous Williams malt extract. Their Williams German Pils is mashed with pure German Moravian 2-row barley malt for a light blonde color and malty crispness you just can't get from other extracts. Or check out their unique fermenters, draft beer equipment, bottling aids, and more. They even have their own line of precision hydrometers. Go to williamsbrewing.com to browse their vast selection and enter promo code BREW at the order checkout for $5 off your next order over $50. Orders placed by 3 p.m. ship the same day. Again, go to williamsbrewing.com and enter promo code BREW at checkout for $5 off your next order. Brewing is easy, the Williams way.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
Well, we really should keep the microphones going during the breaks because, you know...
That's where the good stuff happens.
Yeah, well, we got Dr. Charles Bamforth here, and you know, he's a wealth of fantastic information and insight, so it's a lot of fun during the breaks. It's a real treat for us to have you here. We really appreciate you coming out and spending this time with us. I know you've got... family stuff to run off to today, and that's very important that you need to be there. So
well, it's nice to be here.
We'll make a point of having you back.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if we can talk him into coming back.
No.
Now that you've seen the rat pad in Pacheco.
If we haven't creeped him out too much. First thing Dr. Bamforth 70 comes in here and goes, "Oh, so you're single."
You're single.
Yeah.
And not going to get married for a long, long time based on what I see around here.
That's right. All right. We do have to let Charlie go.
Yeah.
Looks like we have time for one more.
Last question.
Okay. Karev in the chat room asks, he wants to understand more about the contact time for dry hopping and the relationship to that and the retention of aroma and flavor in beer. And then quickly as a follow-up, does dry hopping in the secondary versus the serving keg affect the impact on aroma retention?
Okay, well, my real experience and knowledge of dry hopping really pertains to English traditional cask ales. Which, of course, there's the handful of hops are added to the barrel at racking alongside the priming sugar and the isinglass finings. And, of course, then the barrel will be rolled and find its way into the pub, and it'll be allowed to settle again. So the whole contact time there is going to be of the order of what, a couple of weeks. And then, of course, once the barrel is broached, then you've got 3 days. So, if we're talking contact time, we're talking that sort of length of time for traditional English ale. Clearly, the factors that matter are the variety of the hop, or the type of hop, the stage at which you're going to introduce it, and just how intense a hoppy character you want. Praying, please, that there's no simple correlation between the intensity of dry hop character and quality. A really good beer will be the right balance of maltiness and hoppiness. So really, again, and I've said this twice now, so I'll say it a third time, it really is, well, try it for yourself and see what works for you in the product that you want, in terms of the stage at which you add it. So choosing a type of hop and introducing it in the way in which you see fit. I've seen all sorts of intriguing things in my travels. I saw one brewery on the East Coast go out and buy every set of women's tights they could find in the local shop, and they packed them solid with hops and threw them into the beer downstream. I don't know how long they left them there, but they were clean tights.
Good, I think.
So really, it's a case of, well, what works for you? What gives you the intensity you want? But the whole thing started with traditional English ales, and the contact time there would be a matter of a very few weeks.
How much hops per barrel were they adding for those?
Well, the classic way of describing it is a handful of hops. So,
okay, so that would be roughly half ounce to an ounce.
Yeah, something like that. Literally a handful of hops for a 36-gallon. Remembering, a barrel in the UK is bigger than a barrel in the US, 36 as opposed to 31. So, but a handful of hops.
Okay.
Fuggles, preferably.
Uh-huh. And also, any of our Nathan Smith, one of our favorite homebrewers who comes on the show, he's done 2 hoppy beer shows with us, and one of them really focused on dry hopping. So if you look at this Sunday session and listen to any of the Nathan Smith shows, he did a lot of the trial and error that Charlie's suggesting you do yourself. So you can listen to him talk about that on those shows.
It's interesting when you talk about cask-conditioned ale. Trial and error comes into it. I mentioned isinglass. We used to do all sorts of trials. Every season's crop of malt, you had to do the trials to see exactly the right amount of isinglass that you had to put in, with jars and glass-ended casks and so on. And it was trial and error. And the most successful brewers would do that. They'd see what worked for them.
Right.
I was always curious about isinglass. Like, how did they start using fish guts in beer?
I wasn't there. I have no idea. Can you imagine? I have no idea how it started. But intriguing to find out.
Well, one of the theories was that they would be using a fish bladder or some sort of animal bladder for carrying around their liquid, their beer in, and they would realize it would be clearer when after it was stored in the bladder or something like that. That was, I think, one of the theories I read at one point. Who knows?
I probably wrote that myself.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think that's our show for the day. We'll get you out of the studio only a few minutes late. And we really appreciate you, again, being with us. If you get a chance, check out our sponsor, morebeer.com. They have great prices, great products, and they are great people supporting what we do here, so make sure you support them. Also, if you get a chance, stop by the Brewing Network store. You're going to find Brew Strong shirts there.
Yep.
John and I wear one, and we're going to make sure Dr. Bamforth's wearing one before he leaves. And also, you're going to find some books in there from us and signed copies as well. Glassware, lots of goodies in the store. And all that goes to the bottom line of the Brewing Network, helps us keep programming like this on the air. And remember, go out and brew a beer for yourself, brew some for some other people, and as always, brew strong.
Brew strong, Cretans.